Bhutan, a small Southeast Asian country nestled between India and Tibet. It sits in the Himalayas and is known more for its gross national happiness than its gross national product. But can it make decent coffee? Hello caffeine fiends, I'm Vince the Mean Bean Machine, and today we're looking at coffee I have brought back from the Kingdom of Bhutan, Bhutan Mountain Coffee. So, let's contextualise that a little bit. Recently I went away hiking through Bhutan, which is a tiny little country very close to Nepal. There's a small stretch of Indian land that actually separates it from Nepal, but it's along that Himalayan range, so it's a mountainous country in the Himalayas, very tiny, next to kind of Chinese Tibet and India, and it essentially is carving out itself, very proud of its identity because it sits between those two big nations. Very small, very kind of Buddhist. It's a Buddhist-led kingdom, and their main their way of life is built around this concept of gross national happiness. So they are less focused on making money rather than making people happy. And one way they do this is by conserving their environment. They have committed to conserving 60% of their country as wild forest. And at the moment, it sits at 72%, which is stunning when you visit the place because it's the majority of the country is wild forests, you know, growing over these Himalayan mountains. And then you also have kind of rural areas which are paddy fields, and basically there's not a lot of industry or, you know, residential places in this country. And it's a beautiful, stunning, kind of mysterious country. There's a lot of kind of Buddhist temples and holy reverence there. But yeah, that's their whole deal is built around this concept of generating happiness and environmentalism. So they limit tourist numbers every year. It's very hard to get in as a tourist, and if you do get in as a tourist, you've got to pay a fee for each day you're in the country on top of paying for everything else. So it's an interesting and naturally diverse country. A lot of natural resources, but they have the mountains for growing coffee. They don't really have the weather for it. So there's a small region in the south which they've started to grow coffee in. So whilst I was out there, I was looking all over, where I was largely going from kind of west to east of the country. So I started out the far west of where you land in your, you know, where all international flights land, in this town called Paro. And then I moved through to the east, kind of just going just east of central of the country down the Trans-Bhutan Trail. So I was out there, and whilst I was out there, I found out they grew coffee, or I knew they grew coffee, but I don't think I've ever tried Bhutanese coffee. I'm not sure it really makes it to the European market, because it's a tiny country. They don't do a lot. They can't possibly produce enough to export very far. I mean, I'm sure it has made it to European markets, but not where I've been shopping. So I found this out, and I was desperate to get my hands on some. My guide out there told me it's only really in the south of the country, so I sort of gave up on it a bit. But on the last day in Paro, which again is where you fly into and fly out of, I found a specialist coffee shop, which is predominantly aimed at tourists, that does sell Bhutanese coffee from the Bhutan Mountain Coffee Company, who own the Mountain Cafe as well. And I actually read up on it on the plane home, and it's a organisation that provides kind of free beans to a kind of collaborative of farmers in the area, and provides them with the training to grow the beans, and then they harvest them and sell them on. And it's in line with this idea of kind of environmental conservatism. They reuse a lot of the grounds. The whole of the Mountain Cafe, where they sell the beans and roast the beans, composts all of its waste, and it's a really interesting setup. But Asia is not known for great coffee. It's largely known for kind of Vietnamese Robusta coffee, Chinese coffee, and you do get Arabica, don't get me wrong. But I didn't hold out much hope for Bhutanese coffee. But anyway, whilst I was in this coffee shop, I bought the Bhutan Mountain Coffee. They only have the one kind of roast, dark roast, single origin. So I thought I'll try that out and basically see how it goes. So I've brought a bag home for myself. And it's an interesting. It cost me about a tenner in possibly a bit less, $9.50 maybe, in Bhutanese Goldtrum, I think is how you pronounce it. So in the local currency, but I think it translates to about $9.50, £10, possibly a little more. But it wasn't horrendous for a bag of, like, because that's 500 kilograms, not 250 kilograms. So it's a decent bag, and I managed to shove it in my backpack and get it all the way back to England. So here we are. Now, like I say, I'm a snob about Asian coffee because I sort of pin it all on Robusta coffee, which is not fair, because this is Arabica coffee. China's doing great coffee. Vietnam's doing good stuff. You can get decent coffee. So what is Bhutan doing, basically? So unfortunately, they only do a dark roast, which is not my thing. But I don't mind that. I don't mind a dark roast. It's just not my thing. But the tasting notes are low acidity, heavy body, clean and balanced, chocolatey and nutty. So chocolatey and nutty, I don't mind that at all. So we'll give that a go. I hope it's nice, because it's a big old bag I've got to get through. Now, I would have thought Bhutan is largely too cold because of the Himalayas. But this growing region in the south apparently has the right weather for long enough of the year, which makes sense. They've got the mountains and the rainfall for it, so they just need the warmth. So as long as they've got a little area that has the warmth, the south, it works out. And with global warming, it's starting to spread further and further. So it's an interesting little setup, as I said, and I'm glad I managed to get some home. So what am I expecting from this? I'm actually expecting, being a dark roast, I'm expecting kind of an almost heavy coffee feel, but not too much acidity, nothing, sort of a coating of the tongue, but nothing to catch you at the back of the throat. I think I will prefer it as an oat latte. But it will hopefully that nuttiness will be drawn out. But it'll be nice if it's kind of sweet. But I don't think it will. I think it'll be kind of dark and fairly heavy on the tongue. Those are just my initial thoughts, but we'll give it a go. So, as always, I've got my espresso shot, I've got my oat latte, and I've got my glass of water to cleanse my palate. So, let's start the tasting. I'm going to give my palate an old clean. First and foremost, refresh that. So, yeah, Bhutan is a beautiful country, by the way. If you're ever thinking of visiting and have the money, I would recommend it. There's not a lot to do bar hiking and seeing temples and religious sort of shrines and areas. But if you want to hike the Trans-Bhutan Trail, it's stunning. You know, it's all kind of yaks and rurality. I'm not sure that's a word. That sounds like something from Mortal Kombat, but you know, stunning country because it's still largely wild as well. So you see so many different animals and different birds, and you sort of get this impression of, oh, this is how things should be. You know, the world in its natural state before we started, you know, civilizing things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't build or whatever, but it just feels sort of right. Anyway, so here we go. So it smells very dark, but not too heavy. So this is the espresso shot. Here goes. There is a weird sort of striking sharpness across the tongue that's almost doesn't catch at the back of the throat. The nuttiness is definitely there, but there's a striking almost menthol feel to it. It's not obviously kind of minty, but that sort of sitting at the front of the tongue. There's almost a medicinal, just right at the tip of the tongue. But then the rest of the body sort of coats the tongue in a nuttiness. So it's this sort of sharp strike, and then you kind of go, oh, there's a warmth that follows through. So I'm not really a fan of this as an espresso, I don't think. But I'm not getting a lot of chocolatiness either. But that nuttiness is definitely there. I don't mind that as an espresso, but I'm not an espresso drinker. But that sort of sharp strike, initial strike, just puts me off a little bit. But it's not unenjoyable. It's not unenjoyable by any sense of imagination, but it's just not for me. I'm not getting a lot of chocolatiness. I'm hoping that is more drawn out with the latte. It's not as heavy as I thought it'd be. I thought it'd be kind of dark and dense, and it's not. It's definitely a dark roast. So it's milder than I thought it would be. There's not that lingering darkness that you would expect. It's quite mild, quite nutty, but there's just that weird sort of strike on the tongue initially that catches you off guard. But pleasant enough. So yeah, from the oat latte, I'm hoping a bit more chocolatiness. I'm hoping more of that rises through the oat. And I'm hoping that initial kind of, like I say, medicinal strike is peeled back. And it works better with milk, or oat milk at least. What I found in Bhutan is they don't have a lot of alternatives to milk. So I was drinking black coffee out there. Problem is, most of the country, even in the posh hotels, is serving you instant or kind of not great drip filter stuff, or percolator kind of coffee. So, I mean, there's a few specialist coffees around Paro, but I think that's largely because they know that's where all the tourists will be, as you fly in and out. So I didn't have a great time with the coffee out there. But here goes with this. And I'm hoping, like I say, it works out more as an oat latte, because I drink an oat latte every day. An oat latte. I drink about 3 to 5, but anyway. Hoping for something sweeter, more sweetness to maybe to come through. Oh wow. So that is really chocolatey, actually, with the oat milk. It sort of, the sweetness of the oat milk sort of almost brings out the sweetness of the coffee. And that medicinal strike is not there. There's still something, almost an acidic. It claims to be low acidity, and it is. You don't get any kind of acidity in the cheek or the throat, but there is the bite on the tongue. And I guess there's just a lingering. Yeah, this is still coffee, there. But it's actually really pleasant as an oat latte, really pleasant. But it's not strong. It's a very mild, chocolatey, and I guess that nuttiness is there as well. That kind of warm, toasted effect. So it's just on the top as a top layer. You kind of go, oh, that's chocolatey, and then there's a nice sort of roasted nuttiness to the top notes. It's really chocolatey, actually. You very rarely get a coffee that chocolatey. And I like that. I like that as an oat latte a lot. Not so much as black. I don't think I'd ever particularly drink that black. But as an oat latte, warm, nutty, and quite mellow, basically. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. But in the meantime, do hit those like and subscribe buttons. Check us out at getbeaned.com. And yeah, I'll see you all in a bit. Bye-bye.